If you had told me 3 months ago that the Polish national selection for Eurovision would result in one of the artists being banned from Belarus and being labelled an extremist, I probably wouldn't have believed you. But given the way that the 2025 season of Eurovision is going so far, that is the level of chaos that I'm kind of coming to expect. In all seriousness though, Poland and Eurovision hasn't always been a match made in heaven. Luckily though, this year it feels like we've started to turn a corner. As well as going through why that is, we're also going to talk through the Polish national selection for Eurovision this year and, of course, talk about their Eurovision entry. I genuinely think that some of the signs that things were about to start improving were already present last year, even though they didn't qualify for the final. I'm going to explain why that is. Quickly before we get started, the usual stuff, make sure to like the video if you enjoy it, make sure to subscribe to the channel as well. You can follow me and my editor Jay on social media, all the details are in the description, and you can support us financially as well on a one-off basis via Ko-fi or on Patreon or via YouTube membership. We are also streaming every Sunday night at 8 p.m. UK time. Now we've got that out of the way, let's go through Poland's revamped national selection. A lot of the hype ahead of the selection this year was focused around one person, and that was Justyna Steczkowska. She is an absolutely massive star in Poland, and she previously represented them at Eurovision in 1995. That said, some of the competition in this show to Justyna was really, really good. And in fact, one of the songs we're going to talk about today is probably my favorite song from any national selection that didn't actually end up getting selected to go to Eurovision. This selection had 11 songs, but to save time, we're only going to talk about the top 5. Sadly, that means Sabrina Carpenter from Wish.com isn't going to get a moment in the sun other than this brief second.
I'm working late, 'cause I'm a singer.
Let's start with 5th place. That was Kuba Szmajkowski with his song Pray.
Waiting for something to change, praying for a better.
This isn't Kuba's first rodeo when it comes to trying to go to Eurovision. He previously finished 4th in the national selection in 2022. That year he lost out to Ochman, who is best known for starting Poland's over-the-top on-screen graphics era. While his effort in 2022 was fairly straight down the line electropop, this time we're getting something different. It's still a fairly simple pop song, but it taps into some gospel influences that give it a little extra kick. It is very derivative though, and you've probably heard 20 bands or more who've done exactly the same thing that Kuba is doing. The lyrics of this are pretty vapid as well, and while you could argue on some level that they're appropriate for a gospel song, it doesn't make Pray for a Better Day any more of an interesting rhyming scheme. There's also not really enough build-up, and as a result, you kind of find yourself wanting more by the time you get to the final chorus. This certainly isn't a bad song, but 5th place flattered it a little in my opinion, and personally, I did prefer his previous effort from 2022. At the same time, it's a good sign for the selection that even the mid-pop songs are much more listenable than in some other places. Jumping quickly forward to the 4th place in the selection, that was Chrust with their song Tempo. I'm not 100% sure on how to pronounce the name of this band. In general, Polish pronunciation is pretty tough. I'm giving it my best shot, but please, Polish viewers, don't laugh at me in the comments. Or if you do, at least do it in a nice way. Anyway, this song is a pretty dramatic jump from the one we just talked about. It's a pretty easy way to my heart to combine some traditional folk elements with some kind of more modern pop sound. You can look to Vis Minus Pulup for a perfect example of this from last year. While I don't like this as much as I liked that, and that is a very high bar I've just set, this is still pretty great. It opened the show, and while it makes sense to open with a song as dramatic as this, I can't help but think it maybe had a downwards pressure on their televote a little bit. It would have been great to see what they could have done had they got a prime spot. You have all of the ingredients here, whether that's enough drums to make it sound like a war song, a witchy lead singer wearing traditional attire, and a giant wicker man on stage, to overall present a pretty compelling package. To be honest, I could have easily seen this one at Eurovision as well. In addition to that, it comes with a really challenging vocal that for the most part I thought was really well delivered. The thing that really makes or breaks a song like this is authenticity. And if you look at the comments on YouTube for this song, it is full of Polish people basically confirming just how faithful this was. This felt like a genuine and proper representation of Polish folklore, presented in a way that was super accessible to the viewer. That went right down to how the performers were dressed, to the props on stage, to to the use of traditional Polish folk motifs in the song. Speaking of lyrics, by the way, it is a sharp turn to go from I pray for a better day in 5th place to the clatter is turning into a gallop, the ground is softening underfoot, the drops are gouging their craters, everything fades with time. That is not very cheery. However, this kind of stuff does add an extra level for me, even as someone who speaks Polish. I recognize that most viewers aren't going to look into it as deeply as Eurofans like us would, but for me personally, that really adds to my enjoyment that it's such a deep meaning. If I had to criticize this, I'd say that the song itself is maybe just a little disjointed. We start loud and fast from the very first moment, and that sets the tone, but the sudden drop-off for a quiet, slower section felt quite jarring. It's as if I suddenly cut off the flow of what I'm saying by making a really awkward transition. We've been built up by that point, and it just kind of makes the energy fade away again. The fast finish to this song helps start to build it again, but because you've lost all of that momentum already, the effect just isn't as strong. As a result, it's probably for the best that this didn't go to Eurovision. That said, they built such a compelling package that I would love to see them back in this show again, next year or the year after. I don't think this is the full potential of their powers, and they could deliver something show-stopping. Moving on to the top 3, and we're starting with Dominik Dudek. His song was Hold the Light.
Hold the light up above. Hold me tight, hold me tight.
I have to get one thing off my chest to start with, and those of you who've been Eurovision fans for some years, I'm sure will have heard this as well. The first 2 notes of this song sound exactly like Nobody But You by Cesar Sampson from 2018.
I've seen it.
Lord, I'm gonna get so high tonight.
In fact, more generally, the entire song kind of sounds like Nobody But You. You have the same gospel style present in Nobody But You and present to a lesser degree in one of the songs we've already talked about. This definitely leans into it more though. There's no doubt that Dominik is a really talented singer, and this is certainly not a bad song. Unfortunately, it suffers from the same problem that I so regularly bring up when it comes to songs in crowded niches and genres. If you want to bring a typical gospel song in this style, you have to do it better than it's done before in order to truly stand out. In a Eurovision context, this is completely in the shadow of Nobody But You, and outside of that, it completely pales in comparison to the best of what this genre has to offer. The whole package kind of gives me auditioning for The Voice kind of vibes, which is ironic given that's exactly what Dominik did in 2022. To be honest, I was a bit surprised to see Taya listed among the songwriters for this song as well, because compared to her own Eurovision entry in Who the Hell is Edgar, as well as other songs she's written for the national finals this year, such as Heaven Sent by Christy Spiteri in Malta, this just felt like it lacked some of the edge and some of the flair that those songs had. As a result, I just felt a little disappointed in the package overall. The strong performance earned it a good finish, but this was never going to go any higher than 3rd. While we're on the topic of edge and flair though, the song that came 2nd in this selection had it in buckets. That was Svada and Nichos with their song Lusterka. This might well end up being my favourite song from any selection this year that didn't make it to Eurovision. And I'm really glad, given how disappointed I would have been had I been this obsessed with this song before the show. It didn't click for me until the week after. Had I been this invested in this song before the show, I would not have been able to deal with the fact that it didn't win. This song is sung in the Podlasian language. This language is spoken in some small parts of eastern Poland, and it's most similar to Belarusian and Ukrainian. I feel like in general there is a real lack of knowledge about minority languages in Eastern Europe. For example, I doubt any of you have ever heard of the Sorbs or the Kashubians, but as a result of hundreds of years of various empires shifting the borders, there's this really fascinating ethnic and linguistic landscape that just does not get enough attention or enough celebration, whether that's in the Eurovision Song Contest or in society more widely. Given that this song came 2nd in the selection, it's so refreshing to finally see some of that appreciation come through. On that point, evidently, in some circles, this kind of cultural representation is seen as extremely dangerous. Those circles include the ruling classes in Belarus, who labelled one of the artists an extremist only a few days before the national selection. For that reason alone, these guys really need to enter again next year. With any luck, that will be the thing that finally makes Lukashenko's head explode. I'm getting really off topic now, but there's actually an interview somewhere out there that I did at Eurovision 2017 with a Belarusian opposition news channel. It is extremely embarrassing and I am not going to share it here. But what you can have is these two stills from it explaining to you what is a bad flag and what is a good flag. Back to the song now, and the genre of this is described as Podlasia bounce, which is something I have not heard of before now, but I am very glad to be made aware of it. It actually reminded me of the Ukrainian song Good Evening, Where Are You From by Probass and Hardy, which has a similar fusion between modern electronic music and traditional elements. If you've ever seen a clip of a Russian tank undergoing rapid disassembly courtesy of a Ukrainian drone, you've probably heard that song. Just in case you haven't, I'll play a bit of each song side by side so you can see what I mean.
Доброго вечора, ми з України.
The vibes aren't the same, but they're similar enough that I thought it merited mentioning. And given the proximity of cultures and languages between Belarusians and Ukrainians and Podlasians, this isn't too much of a surprise. That said, this song still has its own unique elements that make it really special. It starts with this really gritty feel that gives it a sharp edge that, in my opinion, no other song in this selection had to the same degree. It's almost as if you could have it over the top of one of those compilations of Soviet blocks from the 70s that seem to go viral on Instagram every month. At the same time, as the song falls away into a completely different bridge, it feels like we're reaching to something completely different. The vocal in this section is almost ethereal, and to be honest, it's probably my favorite part of the song. All of this comes together in a live performance that was absolutely next level. The level of aura that these guys exude on stage is absolutely ridiculous. And quite frankly, it's going to take a lot for anyone to match that on any Eurovision stage this season. It's not just the way that your attention is grabbed straight away, but also the fact that you feel the sheer presence of the vocalist on stage. In case it wasn't already obvious, I am totally obsessed with this. In my opinion, this kind of music is what Eurovision is all about. It should be a crossroads where, yes, you have your ballads and your solid pop songs and the things that you can dance to, but also where you should be able to be hit by and completely blown away by something that you've never even conceived of before. This opens a door to a whole new language and culture that most Europeans would never have come across in their lives. And proponents of the Podlasian language and culture in Poland have hailed its influence. The quote that really struck with me was a Polish-Belarusian journalist who has been compiling a dictionary of the Podlasian language for some years now. He said that for 20 years I failed to introduce the Podlasian language into the mainstream, and now it's been done thanks to one song. I am very sad that this won't be at Eurovision, but I'm so grateful it was in this selection, and I'm so grateful that such a large number of Poles watching this show recognized how amazing it is. I feel really lucky to have been exposed to this as a result. It does hurt that it won't go any further, but at least the blow is softened by the fact that what is going to Eurovision for Poland this year is also really, really good. I mentioned her name at the start, and now we're going to talk about her song. It's Justyna Steczkowska, returning to the contest after 30 years with her song Gaia. My first brush with this song wasn't this year, and it wasn't her attempt to enter the contest last year either. It wasn't even her entry from before I was born in the 90s. It was actually this Sims 3 made music video for her song To co jest ci dane. At that time, I participated in a kind of mini Eurovision on the ESC United forums called World Vision. A friend of mine was so obsessed with Justyna and her music that he sent her music to that contest on 11 different occasions. As a result, she kind of slowly made her way into my brain. And a couple of her songs, like the aforementioned To co jest ci dane and Terror, have been on my radar for some time now. Justyna's desire to return to Eurovision, as I just mentioned, isn't new for this year either, because she did try to go to the contest last year. Gaia is a pretty similar vibe, but it feels like a more refined and more polished version of the same concept. As a result, what we end up with is more coherent, if still a little chaotic. It even quotes Witcher Tarahoro in a way, because each of the songs have a section which are eerily similar. Coming into the national final with a 100% public vote system and a big and ready to mobilize fan base behind Justyna, it was always likely that she was going to take the victory. Even if she was a complete unknown, Gaia still would have been a contender. As well as being ridiculously camp and really dramatic, it's also just a great song. Justyna has an incredible voice, and her breath control and the technical versatility she's able to display are totally out of this world. She has the ability to switch to this rasping tone that I have genuinely hardly ever heard anywhere else, and it makes her vocal performances instantly memorable. Unfortunately, on this occasion though, with the live performance, she did find herself swimming against the tide. That's because if you listen to it, you can tell that she is going out of time. As soon as I heard that, I thought it was out of character, and as it turns out, I was right. Justyna had in-ear problems during this performance. As a result, while she did go a bit out of time on this occasion, it shouldn't have a bearing on the future. And as a result, I'm not worried on this front at all for Eurovision. In any case, the fact that she was able to sing so well without her in-ears goes to show just what an amazing professional she is. I will say though that there was a little bit of weirdness with this as well. First among this was the interesting dance moves. Some of it was really impressive, and I admire Justyna's upper body strength for the way she was able to hold herself in this position for 20 seconds with no extra support, and simultaneously hitting some pretty incredible whistle notes. But the slightly odd hip thrusting that followed it was more than a little silly. Beyond that, while some people really enjoyed the random dude who started singing in the bridge, for me it kind of felt like it came out of nowhere just because he was totally detached from the rest of the performance. All of that aside, I do think it's worth mentioning that it's pretty impressive to be able to execute a demanding choreo like this and deliver a stunning vocal performance at the same time at the age of 52. That's right. This woman is 52 years old. She doesn't look a day over 40, and she performs like she's in her 30s as well. If I am anything like as fit as Justyna is at the age of 52, I will be very pleased. Zooming back out to the broader selection, to be honest, I think it was always clear that Justyna was going to win this. The only thing that stopped me from saying so in advance was the fact that I assumed that last year, and I ended up being completely wrong. This time, I didn't want to curse it. She has the pre-existing fan base, and she brought a song and a stage package that put her in an unassailable position. When you're as established and as beloved as she is in Poland, as long as she lived up to expectations, she was always going to sail through, and that's exactly what happened. As for Justyna's chances at Eurovision, I think we should start by stating the obvious, which is that this is going to qualify without a problem. The song and the performance, as is, are already clearly strong enough to go to the final, and with the additional fundamental advantages of the Polish diaspora in a 100% televote system, that qualification is essentially a formality. As for the final, what makes me really excited about the chances of this song is the level of technicality in the vocals that Justyna displays. On the surface level, yes, they sound amazing to listen to, but the amount of ground covered and the high level of difficulty of the performance means you have massive jury potential here. That combined with a solid public vote appeal means that I really think we could be on for a top 10 finish. At the very least, we're seeing it on the left-hand side and in the high teens. A finish like that would mark Poland's best result in Eurovision since 2016. And if Michał Szpak's total of 229 points could be surpassed, then it would be Poland's best finish since 2003. With a song and a performer like this, I think that is absolutely on the table. The thing, though, that's even more exciting to me than that is the way in which the Polish broadcaster and the Polish national final have turned 180 degrees in such a short time. It's not that long ago that I put the Polish national final in the lowest possible tier in my national finals tier list, which was the very first video I did on this channel. There are a number of factors behind this massive revolution. Firstly, the broadcaster has engaged heavily with the Polish branch of OG, which is the official Eurovision fan club. That in turn has helped develop a much better format, and in particular, I think it's a really good idea that they've moved to an 100% televote. As well as that, immediately releasing the voting figures after the show was a massive step forward in terms of transparency. This is especially true considering that the 2023 numbers were only released after the OG branch that I just talked about took the broadcaster to court and legally forced them to release them a year after the show. Secondly, though, what has changed more than anything else, and is probably the biggest factor in this, is way above the level of the Eurovision Song Contest. That is the Polish elections that took place in late 2023. They brought an end to the previous Polish government, which constantly and shamelessly interfered with the Polish broadcasters' output. They did this to such an extent, and with particular focus on negatively portraying LGBT people, that a TV host gave an on-air apology to the Polish LGBT community after the government changed.
LGBT+ to nie ideologia, a ludzie. Konkretne imiona, twarze, bliscy i przyjaciele. Wszystkie te osoby powinny dziś usłyszeć słowo przepraszam właśnie z tego miejsca. Przepraszam.
Dziękujemy.
Aside from this, there were massive, sweeping changes in the broadcaster's direction and in its management immediately after that election took place. These changes started to affect the selection last year already, because there were some seriously strong songs in that process, but the effects were much more keenly felt this year. The level to which the broadcaster has managed to detoxify its brand over such a short amount of time has massively increased the number of artists who are willing to consider participating. In turn, the trajectory of this show and of Poland in Eurovision has massively shifted. This is a really exciting prospect because it raises the possibility that at long last, after years of underachievement, we could finally see the level of results in Eurovision that Poland deserves, as well as the kind of things they've been capable of achieving for a decade or more. A great result for Justyna this year, as well as a continued improvement in the broadcaster, will massively increase the incentive for more artists to take part in the future. That in turn will drive up the quality of the eventual entries. This is the reason why the title of this video raises the possibility that one day Poland really could be a Eurovision powerhouse, and that for the first time it feels like they're starting to really get the contest again. Just think about how far we've come, even just in these 3 years. We've gone from 2023, where a massive fan favourite in Gladiator by Jan was screwed over by the juries, which had clear links to some of the other artists, followed by a year of legal nonsense to release the full televote results. Then, in 2024, recognising that the national selection and the trust in it was fundamentally broken, they abolished it and replaced it with an internal process that, while clearly imperfect and only ever really an interim solution, was a much better solution than what they had had the year before. They got a song out of that in the tower that was tipped to qualify right until the night of the semi-final. It only fell down after a shaky live performance with less than ideal vocals. This year we had a full national selection again, with several songs that would have fully deserved a place at Eurovision. If this trend continues, then I will be so excited to see what Poland could do in the next few years, and I desperately hope that this momentum continues. At the very least, they have a few years before the next election to establish this format and make it a serious and untouchable part of the broadcaster's programming. Hopefully though, this show will be able to prosper long after 2027. It's so refreshing to feel optimistic about a country in Eurovision that, to be honest, has been underachieving as long as I've been watching the contest. Given Poland's multiple wins in Junior Eurovision already, it is clearly long overdue a victory in the actual contest. I personally would love to see Eurovision in Gdansk on the Baltic Sea, but that's probably just my pro-Baltics bias coming through there. With that, we're going to conclude what has, to be honest, probably been one of the most positive videos on this channel for quite some time now. Polish fans are clearly really proud of Justyna at the contest this year, and they are more than justified in feeling that way as well. I cannot wait to see what she brings to Basel in May, but in the meantime, it's time to end for this week. Don't forget to tune in next Friday at 7 PM for another video, and every Sunday at 8 PM for the weekly live stream. All of those times are in UK time. Don't forget to like this video, like I said before, and subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed it. Thank you for watching, and I'll look forward to seeing you again in 7 days' time.